Alright guys, today we're going to work on determining how to tell which number is greater and how many times greater when the numbers are in scientific notation. So remember, the whole purpose of scientific notation is to write a number that is really large or really small in an easier format. So that way we can calculate it a lot easier, not make mistakes in our calculator and so forth. So in order to do that, if we're trying to figure out how many times greater a number is, we have to do the opposite of times, which is divide. So in this situation, we're going to set these up as division problems. We're going to work on these three questions here because there's not one like question number 15 on your assignment, and then there's one on the back that we'll do as well. So let's start with the first one, number 12. All right, it says, I'm going to work it out on a piece of paper here. So it says 7 times 10 to the 12th power and 3.5 times 10 to the 9th power. So first thing we need to know is which one is greater. So how do we determine which one is greater? We look at their exponent. All right, so we're going to look at the exponent. We have the exponent 12. We have the exponent 9. 12 is the greater exponent. Therefore, 7 times 10 to the 12th power is a larger number. Because remember, all of these factors, the first factor is set up to one digit in front of the decimal. The exponent tells you how many times to move that decimal. So we start here, we move it 12 times. We start here, we move it 9 times. So this one's going to be the bigger number. So we start off with setting it up as a fraction. So we have 7 times 10 to the 12th power over 3.5 times 10 to the 9th power. And so don't worry, you don't have to stick all this in a calculator. We're going to break it up into two parts. So here's our first part, here's our second part. In the lesson, when they had us work these questions out, they kind of started talking about looking at the powers of 10. Then you looked at the factors. I'm just condensing all of that without so many words into one thing. So the first thing we're going to do is take 7, divide it by 3.5. So if you take 7, you divide it by 3.5 in your calculator, you're going to get the number 2. All right, and then remember, when we have a fraction, a division problem, when our bases are the same, we subtract our exponents. So we're going to say 12 minus 9. So this would be the same as saying 2 times 10 to the 3rd power. And so since we're not going to say this number is 2 times 10 to the 3rd power larger, we're actually going to work it out. So 10 to the 3rd power would be 10 times 10 times 10. A quick trick is the number 3 for powers of 10. It only works with powers of 10. The number 3 means that's how many decimals you, or not decimals, my apologies, how many zeros you would have. So 10 cubed is 1,000. So 2 times 1,000 would be not 200, but 2,000. So what this means is 7 times 10 to the 12th power is 2,000 times greater than 3.5 times 10 to the 9th power. All right, so that's what we have to do. To find out how many times greater something is, we got to divide it. So now we're going to look at the next question. So if you still need to write this down or take a note, just pause the video real quick. All right, so our next one says 1.4 times 10 to the negative. So now we're dealing with negatives. I just have to write this down on my paper real quick. So 1.4 times 10 to the negative power and 2.8 times 10 to the negative 4th power. All right, so when you're dealing with negatives, let me do that way you don't think it's a negative, that's just the question. When you're dealing with negatives, the number closest to 0 is your greater number. It's kind of the opposite of the positives. So where 4 is closer to 0 in the positive direction, but it's smaller than 5. It's the opposite. So in this case, 4 is closer to 0 in the negative direction, so it's greater than negative 5. Or just think absolute value, the opposite. So which one is smaller? All right, so in this situation, if we're looking at the exponents, we have -5, we have -4. this one is going to be our larger number. So 2.8 times 10 to the negative fourth is our bigger number. That's the one that's going on top. Then we're going to divide it by 1.4 times 10 to the negative fifth power. All right, so remember, all we're doing is breaking these up into two parts. All right, first part, we're just going to divide the factors. And you could even think about these without decimals. 28 divided by 14. 14 is half of 28, so 28 divided by 14 would be 2. So we have 2 again. Now, this is the tricky part when you're dealing with negatives. Remember, you have to do minus. You're subtracting the exponents, but that's still a negative 5. So you have to do minus a negative 5. So remember, whenever you subtract a negative, it becomes the opposite, and now they're adding. So we have negative 4 plus 5. So this becomes 2 times 10 to the first power. 10 to the first power is 10. So we would have 2 times 10, which equals 20. All right, so what does this mean? Excuse me, sorry. This means that this number is 20 times larger than this number. So we would say 2.8 times 10 to the negative fourth power is 20 times greater than 1.4 times 10 to the negative fifth power. All right, so once we work all of this out, the whole reason we're working it out is just to determine how many times greater. So let's look at the next one. So if you still need to write this down, just pause the video real quick. Just trying to make it as short as possible. All right, so number 14, notice that 16,000 is not already in scientific notation format. So we are going to have to change that and put it into scientific notation. So go ahead, pause the video and do that now. What would be 16,000 written in scientific notation? All right, so hopefully you did that. Remember, you need to move your decimal to where it's between, or it's behind a first non-zero number, which would be the 1. And so how many times would you have to move your decimal to get there? 4. So this would be the same as 1.6 times 10 to the fourth power. So if we're comparing this one and this one has the exponent of 8, so it's going to be your larger number. So that's the one we're going to put as our numerator. So we have 1.6 times 10 to the 8th power over 1.6 times 10 to the fourth power. So remember, we're just breaking this up. All right, 1.6 divided by itself would be 1. And then remember, we subtract our exponent. So that becomes 1 times 10 to the fourth power. Well, 10 to the fourth power would be 4 zeros in my answer. So that would be the same as 10,000. 10,000 times 1 would be 10,000. So then we would say that 1.6 times 10 to the 8 is 10,000 times larger than 16,000. You could say it that way, or you could use the scientific notation. So we would say 1.6 times 10 to the 8th power is 10,000 times greater than 16,000. Or you could say 1.6 times 10 to the fourth power. So hopefully this helps you. There was another one on the back we could quickly do if you need another example, or you could try it and see if you're ready. So let me flip the paper over. Let's look at that one, and then you pause the video. Oh, I have to. Then you pause the video and give it a try. So this one right here, number 17. Jenna collected data about the number of annual visitors to 2 sports blogs. The table shows the data. The number of visitors to the sports space is how many times the number of visitors to the team zone. So first, you need to rewrite this into scientific notation. So pause the video now and give it a try. Alright, so hopefully you gave it a good try. We're going to start off by rewriting the team zone in scientific notation. So, if our number is 12,000, we got to move the decimal behind the 1 in front of the 2. So that would give us 1.2 times, and in order to get there we have to go 3, 4, so 10 to the 4th power. So we're comparing that with the sports space, which was 4.8 times 10 to the 5th power. So first thing we need to know is which one is greater. So we're going to compare their exponents. This one has an exponent of 5, so that one's going to be your larger one. So we're going to set it up with 4.8 times 10 to the 5th power on the top, 1.2 times 10 to the 4th power on the bottom. And then remember, we're just breaking it up, taking one part at a time. So 4.8 divided by 1.2, or you could think about it as 48 divided by 12 gives you 4. Then we have 10 to the 5th power minus the 4th power since they're being divided. So 5 minus 4 is 1, so that gives us 10 to the 1st power. We know 10 to the 1st power is 10. So we can take that exponent away. 4 times 10 is 40. So we would say the sports space is 40 times the number of visitors to the team zone. And so this is how we compare numbers in scientific notation. You're simply dividing the first factors and then using your property of exponent rules for dividing powers that are the same to subtract your exponent in the second factor. So if you still need help, please reach out. And this will actually help you with the rest of the Into Math assignment. So yesterday on that video, I told you that these numbers here are related with this one, and then these here. Except for question 8. Question 8 we did in the original lesson. So technically it's 5 through 7. So you should already have question 8 done. If not, it's a calculator question. You're just typing it in the calculator. So you should be able to do those questions there based on what we just did today in this video. If you still need more help, please reach out.